I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed them. If you're coming for me, hope you're ready for a demon. I got eyes in the back of my head, I'm seeing. Take.
Good morning, interneters. It's been a long time, I'm sorry, but I was busy enriching my other channel, Adivanam Rider, where I had put a lot of new videos. No outdoor shooting, sorry, it's either too hot or it's raining. So we'll have to be content with the shooting within four walls. Now let's come back to our passé composé. In the first part, we saw how to choose between auxiliaire avoir and auxiliaire être. I even compared it to Hindi to make it easier for the Hindi phones. Let's continue because there are more intricacies than what you think with this passé composé. The extra E or the extra S or nothing extra for the past participle is really a pain in the right place in French. I explained some in the first part, of course, but we'll have to develop it because there are more rules than what you think. When you use auxiliaire avoir, basically the past participle remains neutral. But once you use a direct object, if the direct object is after the past participle will remain neutral. J'ai mangé la soupe. La soupe comes after the past participle, manger only E accent. But if the soup is placed in any form, whether as a pronoun or a full noun or as a pronom relatif, then manger will have to take an extra E. Example, tu as mangé la soupe? Question. Answer, oui, je l'ai mangé, L apostrophe, replacing la soupe, feminine singular, so manger, M-A-N-G-E, accent, E.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got.
La soupe que j'ai mangée était bonne. There is a que, pronom relatif, which is a direct object. It is replacing la soupe, which is feminine. So the same thing, manger extra E. This rule will not apply for the pronom en. Having said this, in the oral, you won't face too many problems because if you take the first group verbs, when you say manger, it could be E accent E, it could be E accent S, it could be E accent ES. It doesn't show in the oral, but in the written, yes.
No kneeling, got lust for change, I just love the feeling, no.
Where does it show in the oral is when the past participle ends with a consonant. Like the verb écrire, the past participle ends with IT. So, la lettre que j'ai écrite, you have to show the feminine in the oral also. We have seen a list of verbs with which you use auxiliaire être.
I don't lie at night, I be in my feelings, I'ma be fine, need time and I'll soon be winning. I live life for the fight, yeah, I'm here to get it. I got drive, got.
Among these verbs, there are some that can take also avoir according to the meaning. Let's take a concrete example. The verb sortir. It is in that list. When you have to conjugate it in passé composé, when you want to say I went out, you say je suis sorti, être. But there is another meaning. It's to take out, like one takes out a pen from the pocket. For this, it is no more considered a verb of movement. So you cannot say je suis sorti le stylo. You have to say j'ai sorti le stylo. How do we define it? Well, it's relatively easy. If there is a direct object, don't choose auxiliaire être, choose auxiliaire avoir. Like for instance, le stylo is the direct object. We can take another example if you want. Verbe descendre. When you want to say I went down to the ground floor, there it is je suis descendu au rez-de-chaussée. But suppose it is I came down the stairs. Even in English, if you notice, the stairs is the direct object. So it's not je suis descendu l'escalier, but j'ai descendu l'escalier. So in that same list, there are some verbs that cannot take a direct object. The verb aller, for instance, I went to the cinema, je suis allé au cinéma. Je suis venu du marché. You cannot have a direct object. It can only be with être. Let's analyze the verb passer. Passer has got many meanings. One is to pass by, another one is to spend in the context of time, and the third meaning is to appear for an exam. The verb passer is conjugated with être only in the meaning of to pass by. Like if you want to say, to go to the market, I passed by this road. Donc, pour aller au marché, je suis passé par cette rue. If you want another example with être, I dropped into your house yesterday. Je suis passé chez toi hier. Here it is movement. So you use être. Now when you want to say I spent 2 days in Paris, here it is not être. J'ai passé 2 jours à Paris. And then I appeared for an exam this morning. Ce matin, j'ai passé un examen. Next part. With the pronominal verb, if you have a direct object, then the past participle is neutral. I broke a leg, for instance. Je me suis cassé la jambe. Cassé will be always and only E accent. Even if je is feminine, we don't care. Because how do I put it? The cassé belongs to la jambe. It doesn't belong to you. To put it in simple words.
Feeling I could tear you apart, or I could go heal him. Don't believe in fate, don't believe.
If you replace la jambe by a pronoun, then it will come before the auxiliary verb, because you know the placement of the pronoun in French is before the auxiliary verb. Je me la suis cassé. Now, cassé, extra I, because the direct object is before the auxiliary.
Got too little time, I'ma live up.
Then there is one more part. For instance, the verb se téléphoner. Here I usually pull the leg of my students, asking them, hey, can you conjugate the verb se téléphoner? Then they start saying, je me téléphone, tu te téléphones, il se téléphone. I say, stop. Je me téléphone. Show it, how do you do it? Hello, Soma? Ah, oui, Soma. No, this is the usual joke. So the conjugation of the verb se téléphoner starts only from nous. For je, tu, il, it's not there. For nous téléphonons, vous téléphonez, il se téléphone. When you put this verb in passé composé, nous nous sommes téléphonés, don't put an S. Vous vous êtes téléphoné, don't put an S. Ils se sont téléphonés, don't put an S. Because so far you have learned to deal with pronominal verbs. But this is not a pronominal verb, it's more than that. It is a reciprocal verb where you need 2 people minimum. The expression téléphoner comes with à quelqu'un. So that à quelqu'un is indirect. So when you put it in infinitive, you have se téléphoner. The se is actually an indirect object. And there is no accord du participe passé with an indirect object. So nous sommes téléphonés. Téléphoner will always be E accent. Vous vous êtes téléphoné, E accent only. Ils se sont téléphonés, elles se sont téléphonées, always with the accent only. If you take the verb se rencontrer, do you say rencontrer quelqu'un ou rencontrer à quelqu'un? The correct answer is rencontrer quelqu'un. So quelqu'un is direct object. The same way, this verb also, you don't say je me rencontre. The conjugation will start from nous only. So nous sommes rencontrés, E accent S. Or if the nous are ladies, E accent ES. Vous vous êtes rencontrés, always an S. Ils se sont rencontrés, always an S. Elles se sont rencontrées, always with extra E, extra S. You have to analyze whether the verb takes a direct object or the indirect object. Another example, se voir, to see each other. So it's a reciprocal verb. You need 2 people. Nous nous sommes vus. What do you think? Extra S or no extra S? Thank you.
I can feel the blood creeping up from the heathens. Got will, got fight, got pride, got reason. If they wanna go eat, then you know I'm gon' feed 'em. If you're coming for me, hope you